She said it like I wasn't there, like I hadn't walked through the door on my own 2 legs, shaken the lawyer's hand, and sat down without assistance. "It's just simpler if we handle this for her," my daughter Laura said, not even lowering her voice. "She gets overwhelmed." I was right there. But I suppose in her mind, I'd already been replaced by an empty shell, one you can dress up, move around, and sign for. I looked at the pen lying on the polished mahogany table. I reached for it slowly but firmly, not for support, not for balance, but because I understood perfectly well what I was about to do. "Actually," I said, turning my head toward the lawyer, "I'd like to go over the terms myself, if that's all right, Mr. Davies." Mr. Davies, young, well-mannered, and trying to be invisible in the tension, blinked and nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Barrett. The draft is right here." My daughter shifted in her chair, exhaling sharply. Her lipstick didn't move. Neither did her smile, fixed and professional, like the one she wore at client meetings. "I just think it would be easier," she began, "if I summarized it for you, Mom. You know, less to get bogged down in." I didn't look at her. I adjusted my glasses and leaned in to read. The room was elegant, soulless, an office designed to make people sign things without questioning. Heavy curtains, quiet light, not a place for arguments, which is exactly why she'd picked it. The document was straightforward, at least on paper. A living trust with my home, the garden, and the orchid greenhouse as the primary assets. Upon my death, or a declaration of mental incapacity, it would all transfer directly to Laura, bypassing probate. That was the point of today's meeting, to finalize the paperwork. "Why is there a clause about mental incapacity?" I asked, still reading. "It's standard," Laura cut in. "It's just in case, Mom. You know, if you ever get overwhelmed." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Mr. Davies cleared his throat. "It's a common clause in living trusts. It ensures the beneficiary can act swiftly if the grantor is no longer able to manage the assets." I nodded. "And who decides that I'm no longer able?" The silence lasted 2 seconds too long. "Well," Laura began, "the trust designates me as the agent. So, I'd work with a physician to have me declared incompetent." I finished for her, calmly, quietly. "Only if..." "Mom, don't be dramatic." I closed the folder gently and looked at her, really looked. Her perfectly smooth forehead, her watch expensive, impersonal, her fingernails done in a pale, sterile shade. All the signs of a senior consultant who'd come to manage a project, not to care for a person. "You do know your father and I designed that garden together," I said. "He drew the plans. I planted every seed. We built the greenhouse ourselves, slept in the living room with dust everywhere." Laura smiled politely. "I know, Mom, you've told me." But I wasn't telling her this time. I was reminding myself. "We planted that maple when you were little. You helped me dig the holes. You cried when we trimmed a branch because you thought we were hurting the tree." Her face tightened just a hair. She didn't remember, or she didn't want to. "And now you want me to sign over that house, that living, breathing garden, like it's a line item in a report, a folder, a signature, a click." Laura laughed, that empty, nervous laugh she used when she didn't want to argue but couldn't look weak. "Oh, Mom, don't make this emotional. It's a legal formality. You'll still live there, of course, until you decide I'm overwhelmed." Mr. Davies shifted again. I turned to him. "May I see the alternate draft? The one without the clause?" He blinked. "Well, yes, we prepared one as a contingency." "I can print it. Please do." Laura leaned forward, her voice still even. "Mom, you're not thinking this through. You've always said you wanted me to have the house. This is just a way to avoid taxes and paperwork later." Yes, I said, but I don't recall saying you should get it while I'm still breathing. She flinched, only for a second, then recovered. I looked back down at the draft. I understand everything, Laura, and I know what this is. You're planning for a future where I'm quiet, out of the way, and no longer making decisions. But that future isn't here yet. The lawyer returned with the alternate draft. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I'll sign this one. Laura started to protest, but I raised my hand. You may be used to clients who nod and smile and do what they're told. I'm not one of them. I signed my name slowly, clearly, then handed it back to Mr. Davies. The room was silent. I appreciate your help, I said to him. Then I turned to my daughter. As for you, we'll talk, but not here, not like this. And I walked out first. The silence in my car was heavier than the noise I'd left behind. I sat for a while before turning the key. My hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving. I didn't cry, not from pride, just from sheer exhaustion. You get to a certain age, and even your bones feel every word people throw at you. She gets overwhelmed. I'd been repeating that line to myself all the way from the lawyer's office to my driveway. I'd heard it before, not in those exact words, but in tone, in glances, in the way people talk around you instead of to you. It starts quietly. They speak slower, explain things you already know. Then they start deciding for you. Then they stop involving you altogether. And one day you realize they think you're already half gone. I parked in front of my house, the one Laura was so eager to sign off on. Pale yellow siding, old shutters in need of paint, the maple we'd planted still standing guard out front. I never did like how the siding faded with age, but now I appreciated it. It had earned its wrinkles. So had I. Inside, the air was still. I'd left the curtains open so the afternoon light fell onto the couch, exactly where David used to nap after Sunday breakfast. I stood in the doorway for a long time before taking off my shoes. The quiet was familiar, but today it pressed in differently, like the silence of a courtroom after a verdict you didn't ask for. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon. I'd baked a small batch of scones the night before. No one had eaten them. I rarely ate sweets anymore, but I liked the ritual. It made the house feel less empty. I made tea without thinking. Water, kettle, the same chipped mug with the floral rim. I didn't sit at the table. I stood, leaning slightly on the counter, looking out at the backyard and the greenhouse. The glass needed cleaning. I'd meant to ask Laura's husband, Robert, to help with the high pains. He used to help with things like that before he got too busy. They disappear eventually. The helpers, the check-ins, the thoughtful gestures. You become part of the background. A quiet house with drawn curtains, a name on a Christmas card, a story told over drinks. My mother's still in that place, you know. We try to visit when we can. Try. That word carries so much weight when people don't want to say no. I carried my tea into the living room and sat in David's chair. It creaked beneath me. He always said it would collapse one day, and I always told him I hoped it wouldn't happen with him in it. He'd chuckle, rub his knees, and promise to reinforce it. He never did. I closed my eyes for a moment. I imagined he was still here upstairs, maybe, sketching badly, humming off key, or out back in the greenhouse, pretending to fix something just to avoid doing the dishes. I used to get mad about that. Now I'd give anything to hear his pencil drop on the floor one more time. I opened my eyes and looked across the room. The mantel held 3 photographs. One of David and me at our 40th anniversary, one of Laura in her graduation gown, and one of Emily, my granddaughter, as a child, holding a watering can twice her size, grinning at the tulips. Emily, sweet, distracted, always running late. Emily, the only one who still showed up without an agenda. She'd stopped by just last week, bringing coffee and that lemon cake I can't seem to find anywhere else. She'd talked too fast, as always, hands flying, updating me on her botany coursework and her new part-time job at the nursery. She didn't stay long, but she'd kissed my cheek on the way out and said, "Love you, Grandma. Don't let Mom drive you nuts." I chuckled, remembering. It was Emily who still asked how my orchids were, who noticed when a new bud appeared, who helped me repot a stubborn plant without sighing about the mess. That girl had inherited my patience, not Laura's efficiency, and God bless her for it. I set the empty mug down and stood. My knees ached. They always did, in the late afternoon. But I moved slowly to the secretary desk in the hallway. I opened the bottom drawer, the one David had always called your fortress. Inside, envelopes, statements, the deed to the house, my insurance papers, everything they'd tried to make decisions about without me. I took it all out and laid it on the dining room table. Then I added one more item, a small black notebook, barely used. I opened the first page and wrote in clear cursive, "People think age makes you weak, but I've never felt clearer." Then I made a list. Call Mr. Davies. Request revised trust documents. Done. Review house deed. List all monthly transfers to Laura and her family. Call the bank. Block automatic payments. Schedule meeting with financial advisor. Write a letter to Emily. I underlined the last one twice. I didn't know what the next step would be exactly, but I knew this. I wasn't going to wait in my own house for someone to quietly erase me from my life. I'd fought too hard to keep it, built too much, endured more than Laura would ever guess. The pen was still in my bag from the lawyer's office. I took it out and placed it beside the notebook. "I'm not done," I whispered to no one, and this time I meant it. There was a time when Laura used to braid my hair. She'd sit on the edge of the couch, little fingers tugging too hard, chattering about school, about friends, about books she wanted. She loved mysteries back then, Nancy Drew. "Smart girls with flashlights," she'd say. I'd pretend I didn't know who the culprit was, even when the plot was obvious halfway through. Now I can't remember the last time she touched me without a metaphorical clipboard in her hand. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, fastening the old cameo my mother had given me to the collar of my blouse. I was only going to the grocery store, nothing more ambitious than that, but I wanted to look like someone who had somewhere to be, someone who wasn't fading into the furniture. The blouse was light blue. David once told me it made my eyes look sharper. Outside, the air was crisp. September always feels like a trick summer's warmth lingering on the skin, but something colder already tucked beneath it. I walked slowly down the porch steps. They creaked. Laura had complained about them last year. "We should replace those before you trip," she'd said. "I'll get someone out here." She never did. "They're still standing," I murmured to myself. The corner store wasn't far, and the walk helped. My joints loosened, my breath evened. Familiar faces passed me by, most too young to recognize me, a few offering polite nods. Mrs. Doran, from 2 houses down, waved from her mailbox. We hadn't spoken properly in years, just once after David died. She brought over soup, never stayed. Inside the store, the clerk barely looked up from his phone. I picked up tea, milk, and a single apple. I didn't need more. These days, I buy for one, and I hate throwing food out. At the register, I asked for paper instead of plastic. The boy looked surprised, as if no one had done that in years. "Going green, huh?" he said. "No," I replied. "Just old." He laughed, not unkindly. As I stepped outside, a silver SUV pulled up. I recognized it instantly. Robert's car. She must have sent him for something, or perhaps he was running errands nearby. But then I saw the passenger door open. Laura stepped out. Her heels clicked on the pavement, crisp and practiced. She wore sunglasses, though the sky was clouded. I watched her walk, tall, efficient, moving like she owned every space she entered. Then she saw me. For a split second, her steps slowed. Then the smile came. The one she used on clients, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," she said, as if surprised, though we both knew she wasn't. "Out for a stroll." I held up the paper bag, milk, and an apple. She nodded, then gestured back at the car. "We were just heading to that new brunch place on Elm. Have you tried it?" I shook my head. She hesitated, then added, "They do amazing mimosas. You'd love it." I didn't answer. Instead, I adjusted the bag in my hands. "I was going to call you," she said quickly, "about the paperwork, just to follow up." I met her eyes. I made my decision. Laura shifted her weight, as if trying to remain casual. "It's your right, of course. I just hope you're not making choices out of fear." "Fear?" I raised an eyebrow. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Sometimes older people make impulsive decisions because they think everyone's trying to take advantage. But, Mom, I'm your daughter. I'm not what?" I asked quietly. "Not interested in my property? Not concerned with control?" Her smile faltered. "That's not fair." "I agree," I said. "It's not fair to be talked over, dismissed, and managed like a task on a spreadsheet." She exhaled, frustrated. "You're being emotional. And you're being cold." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her husband stayed in the car, probably watching, pretending to fiddle with the radio. "I was trying to help," she said, softer now. "No," I corrected her. "You were trying to manage me, and that's not the same." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I stepped closer, placing the paper bag gently in the crook of my arm. "I may be old, Laura, but I'm not gone, and I am not your project." She blinked, then looked away. "Tell Robert to check the porch steps," I added. "He promised David he'd fix them." And with that, I walked past her, down the sidewalk, the paper bag swinging softly at my side. I didn't look back. Somewhere behind me, I thought I heard her say, "Mom," but I kept walking. She came without warning, as she always did. Emily never called ahead, never asked if it was a good time. She just showed up with coffee, with noise, with questions, and I was always glad she did. I heard the car door slam first, then the familiar clatter of boots on the path. She didn't walk. She marched. The screen door opened with that crooked squeal it's had since David tried to oil the hinges with dish soap. "Grandma?" she called. "In the kitchen," I answered. Emily appeared, pink-cheeked from the wind, holding a to-go tray with 2 lattes. Her hair was pulled back in that messy bun she pretended was effortless. It never was. "You look good," she said, setting down the drinks. "Like you just told someone off." I raised an eyebrow. "I did. Your mother," she snorted. "Excellent." Emily had always been a strange hybrid. Laura's daughter, yes, but with none of her mother's angles. There was warmth in her, and curiosity. She didn't treat me like an exhibit in a museum or a problem to be solved. When she was little, she used to crawl into my lap and ask me what things were like in the olden days. She still did sometimes, just with more sarcasm. She unpacked a paper bag. "I brought lemon scones. You like lemon, right?" I smiled. "Only when it's real lemon. This is the real deal. Not that plastic yellow icing stuff." She poured the coffee into 2 mugs without asking, sat down at the table, bit into a scone, and groaned theatrically. "So," she said with her mouth full, "what did you tell Mom?" "That I'm not her project." Emily choked on a crumb, swallowed, and grinned. God, I wish I'd been there. I didn't answer. I watched her eat. She reminded me of someone. Not Laura. No, not even as a child. There was something of David in her, not in looks, but in timing. The way she paused before saying something honest, the way her face softened when she was listening. She looked up and caught me staring. What? You look like your grandfather when you chew. Do I? She asked, amused. I nodded. Only prettier. She smiled, then got quiet. Grandma, is everything okay? Really? I hesitated, not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't want to make her carry the weight of things too soon. I'm tired, I said honestly, not of life, just of pretending not to notice what people think of me. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. I went to sign a trust agreement. I continued. Your mother arranged it, said it would make things easier, but it was clear what she meant. She wants the house, the garden. Emily tilted her head now. Soon enough, the papers were drawn so that she could take over if I was ever mentally unfit. She winced. That's disgusting. It's legal, I said. That's what makes it worse. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. Her fingers were warm, real. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at her, long and steady. I'm going to change everything. Her eyes widened. I'm going to talk to the bank. I'm going to talk to my lawyer. And I'm going to make sure that when I'm no longer here, the person who cared is the one who will have something to remember me by. Emily blinked. Wait, Grandma. No, I didn't mean. I'm not trying to. I know. I interrupted gently. That's why. She swallowed hard. I never wanted to be a burden, I continued. But I won't be manipulated, either. Your mother treats me like a stepping stone. You treat me like a person. Emily wiped at her eye with the sleeve of her sweater. I'm just being decent. These days, I said, that's rare enough. We finished our coffee in silence, not the heavy kind, the peaceful kind. I felt more awake than I had in weeks. Before she left, she stood by the door, fiddling with her keys. You don't have to do anything because of me. I know, I said, but I'm doing it anyway. She hugged me tightly. You're kind of a badass, you know that? No, I replied, just a tired woman with a good memory. Then she was gone, and the house was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. I found out about the dinner from the woman who walks her dog past my house every morning. Not from Laura, not from Emily. From Marlene Jenkins, who always wears bright red sneakers and carries a plastic bag full of gossip. They're hosting some big thing on Saturday, she said casually, as if we'd been discussing mutual friends and not my own family. Saw your daughter loading catering boxes into the back of that fancy SUV of hers. Heard it's for Robert. Something about making partner at his firm. Big crowd coming. Real fancy. I stood there in my housecoat, holding the garden shears I'd forgotten I was using. I hadn't heard, I said as evenly as I could manage. Marlene squinted at me. You're not going? They must have forgotten to mention it. She blinked. Then, realizing what she'd stepped into, she faked a cough and tugged the leash. Well, people are so busy these days. I'm sure it's just a mix-up. Sure, a mix-up. After she walked off, I stood in the garden for a long time, staring at the lavender bush that had grown wild without David to trim it. I tried to feel angry. I tried to feel shocked. But the truth was, I didn't feel either. I felt expected. Because this was how it worked now. I was convenient when they needed something, a signature, a check, a story for the family tree. But when there were real celebrations, when there were cameras and catered food and new dresses, I was quietly erased. I walked back into the house, left the shears on the kitchen counter, and sat at the table. They hadn't even tried to lie this time. No call saying, "We're keeping it small." No polite excuse about capacity. Just silence. As if I wouldn't notice. As if I wouldn't matter. They think I'll just stay home. They think I'll make a pot of tea and knit myself into forgetfulness. Not this time. I stood up and went to the secretary desk. I pulled out my notebook and added a line to the list. 7. Find something to wear. If they were going to pretend I didn't exist, I'd remind them quietly, precisely, and in person. I opened my closet and stared at the row of clothes. Most of them were practical. Sweaters, long skirts, the kind of thing you wear when no one's watching. But in the back, wrapped in plastic, was the navy blue dress I wore to David's graduation from architecture school. I hadn't touched it in years. I slipped it off the hanger and held it up. It still looked dignified, still carried the scent of the lavender sachets I kept in the closet. I laid it on the bed and fetched the antique cameo my mother had given me. I set it beside the dress like an old ritual. That night, I took my time. I bathed. I trimmed my nails. I ironed the dress and lined up my shoes. I didn't know if I'd walk through their front door or simply stand on the sidewalk. I just knew I needed to be visible. They weren't going to hide me this time. The morning of the party, I ate toast and read the newspaper, pretending I was calm, but my hands betrayed me, the way they gripped the mug, the way they hovered over the pages without turning them. At noon, I called Emily. She answered on the second ring. "Grandma, I heard about the party." There was silence. Then, "I was going to tell you when." She trailed off. "Are you going?" I asked. "Yes," she said quietly. "Then I'll see you there." Another pause. "You're coming?" "I am." More silence. "I'll save you a seat," she said finally. "You won't have to," I replied. "I'll make my own space." We hung up, and I went back to my list. One last thing to write. 8. Let them see you. Let them really see you. At 6:30, I stood at my front door, dressed and ready. The evening light made the maple leaves glow. I looked at the house behind me, every window, every memory, every inch of it, built with hands they'd forgotten were mine. Then I walked down the steps. They creaked, just like always. I hadn't worn the cameo in over a decade, not since David's funeral. I'd told myself I was saving it for something meaningful, though nothing had felt quite right since he left. But that night, as I fastened it at my collar in front of the mirror, I realized this was meaningful. Not for them, for me. The drive was short. They only lived 15 minutes away in one of those newer subdivisions with identical mailboxes and clean sidewalks. Their house stood out. Of course, bigger, whiter, grander. Laura liked order, symmetry, the illusion of perfection. I parked a little down the street, not wanting to make a scene. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. Through the windshield, I saw cars lined up, guests laughing as they walked to the door, women in heels carrying gifts, men in crisp shirts adjusting their ties. Not one of them knew that Laura's mother wasn't on the guest list. Not one of them knew that the woman who raised her, who taught her to spell her name and tie her shoes and braid her hair, was watching from a distance, like a stranger. I opened the car door. Let them see me. The porch light was already on when I reached their front steps. Music drifted through the windows, soft jazz meant to sound elegant. Laughter, clinking glasses, the comfortable noise of people who believe everything's in its place. I rang the bell. The door opened a moment later. It wasn't Laura. It was Robert, her husband. He looked surprised, then quickly neutral. "Helen," he said, using my full name like a polite stranger. "We weren't expecting." "I know," I said, stepping past him. I heard him exhale sharply but didn't turn around. The hallway was warm, filled with smells of catered food and someone's too strong cologne. I walked slowly, steadily, into the living room. There they were. Laura, standing near the fireplace, holding a champagne flute, laughing with someone I didn't know. Emily, seated at the corner of the couch, her eyes already on me. And people, so many people, dressed well, smiling, comfortable, all part of the picture Laura had curated. The music didn't stop, but the room quieted just a little. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't need to. Laura turned and saw me. Her smile faltered. "Mom," she said, too brightly, stepping forward. We thought you weren't. You thought I wouldn't find out." I corrected, my voice clear. But I did. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Robert hovered near the doorway, unsure if he should intervene. Laura glanced around, then tried to laugh. "There must have been a miscommunication. I thought Emily told you." "She didn't have to," I said. "Marlene Jenkins did. Red sneakers, big mouth." A few people chuckled. Laura didn't. "I didn't come to make a scene," I said. "You don't have to worry." She forced a smile. "Of course not. You're welcome to stay." "I know," I said, "because I'm here." The room stilled again. Some guests turned back to their drinks, politely pretending nothing was wrong. Others watched, curious. Emily stood up and came to my side. "Grandma," she whispered, "do you want to sit?" "No," I replied softly. "I just wanted to see what I was missing." She looked at me with those eyes that still held warmth. I patted her hand gently. Laura cleared her throat. "Mom, why don't we go into the kitchen and talk?" "There's nothing left to discuss," I said, my voice low but sharp. "You made a choice. You chose to exclude me from your life, from your celebrations, from the image you wanted to present. That's not, you didn't forget me," I said. "You removed me. That's different." Someone dropped a fork. No one picked it up. I turned to Emily. "I'll see you tomorrow, dear. We'll have tea. No catering, no speeches, just people who care." She nodded, her eyes shining. Then I turned and walked back out the door. No one followed me, and I didn't look back. David used to say, "You never need to raise your voice if you're telling the truth." The next morning, the sky was pale and clear, the kind of early autumn light that slips through the curtains before you're ready for it. I sat by the window with my tea, watching a squirrel dig frantic little holes in the yard. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's dog barked. Life, as it does, carried on. I hadn't heard from Laura. Not a message, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive email asking if I'd recovered from last night. I wasn't surprised. Cowards hide in silence, and my daughter was a master at professional avoidance. But at 9:17, the phone rang. The landline, the one no one under 40 calls anymore. I picked it up, expecting Emily. It wasn't. "Mrs. Barrett? Mr. Davies here, from the law office." His voice was smooth, cautious. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all, Mr. Davies. I've been up since 6. "Ah," he said, chuckling nervously. "Well, I just wanted to follow up on your last visit. You mentioned wanting to revise the existing documents. I have your alternate trust draft here and would be happy to schedule a time for finalization." I paused, letting my finger run along the rim of the teacup. "I'd like to do more than revise," I said. There was a moment of silence on the line. "All right," he said carefully. "What did you have in mind?" I told him. He didn't interrupt. Not once. Just listened, typing, occasionally murmuring, "Understood," and "Yes, that's possible." By the end of the call, we had a plan, a legal one, precise, quiet, and utterly mine. As I hung up the phone, I felt something settle inside me. Not vengeance, not satisfaction, just the calm of finally acting in your own name. I spent the rest of the morning gathering papers. I opened the drawer where I kept all the family records: David's architectural drawings, old tax returns, insurance documents. I handled them like photographs, each page a reminder of something built, something promised, something forgotten. Among them, I found a folder labeled Gifts, my handwriting from years ago. Inside were copies of checks, one for Emily's college fund, one for Laura and Robert's first down payment. Several were marked reimbursement not required. At the time, I thought I was helping, strengthening family bonds, being a good mother. Now they read like receipts for respect never delivered. I packed everything into a neat leather satchel David once used when he visited clients in the city. It still smelled faintly of graphite and aftershave. At precisely 2:00, I walked into the law office. Mr. Davies stood when I entered, startled again, as if old women weren't supposed to keep appointments. He led me into a private room, not the same one from before. This one had light and no shadows in the corners. I took out the papers and handed them over. "I want to create a new trust," I said, "and a new will." "Of course," he said. "Who will be the primary beneficiary?" I looked him straight in the eye. "My granddaughter." He blinked. "Emily?" "Yes, and no one else." He hesitated. "Would you like to explain the circumstances?" "No," I said, "but I will say this. She's the only one who still knocks before she enters. That's all the reason I need." He nodded and began drafting. It took hours. We revised clauses, added protections, and included contingencies. I didn't let fatigue cloud me. I read every line. When it was done, he handed me the pen. I signed not just the new trust, but myself back into my own story. When I stood to leave, Mr. Davies said, "You know, Mrs. Barrett, it's rare. People your age taking charge like this." "I'm not people," I said. "I'm me." And I walked out with the afternoon sun on my face, my bag under my arm, and no more signatures left to surrender. The bank still smelled like disinfectant and cold air, the kind that settles in your bones and makes you question your memory, but I hadn't forgotten why I came. The clerk behind the counter was new, younger than Emily, with nails like wet glass and an expression that flickered between efficiency and discomfort. I gave her my name, my ID, and a calm smile that I'd practiced in the mirror. She typed something into her computer. "You're here about the automatic transfers? I'm here to stop them," I corrected gently. She hesitated, glancing at the screen. "There are quite a few on record. We'd need a manager to authorize full suspension." "Then fetch one, dear. I'll wait." She blinked, then rose and disappeared down a hallway. A few minutes later, a man appeared, tall, balding, with the polite weariness of someone used to dealing with grown adults who behave like children. He introduced himself as Andrew and led me into a private room with a table, a monitor, and a small, trembling Fern. "Mrs. Barrett," he began, "I understand you want to suspend all automatic payments." "Not suspend," I said. "Terminate. Permanently." He raised his eyebrows. "We're talking about monthly transfers to your daughter's household utilities, tuition support, a few lifestyle expenses." "Lavish lifestyle expenses," I clarified. "Spa memberships, vacation savings, dry cleaning subscriptions." I counted 17 charges that weren't even hers. He cleared his throat. "Would you like to explain the reason?" "No." He waited. When I didn't offer anything else, he nodded and began typing. It took longer than I thought. There were more entries than I remembered approving. Some were years old, some had been updated with quiet increases. Laura hadn't just taken the help, she'd automated the taking. While Andrew worked, I stared at the little fern. One of its leaves had browned at the tip, curling inward like it was tired of trying. I knew the feeling. When he was done, he swiveled the monitor toward me. Here's a list of all outgoing transfers marked for deletion. Please review and initial here. I leaned in, scanned the list. A monthly transfer to a shared family fund. A payment to Emily's wellness account. Interesting. I hadn't known about that. A dozen smaller charges, cleverly named but clear enough. Laura had been thorough. I signed. He printed confirmations. 3 sets. Would you like to notify the recipients yourself? No, I said. Let silence do the work. He nodded slowly. Anything else I can assist with? Yes, I said. I want to open a new account. Trust-based beneficiary Emily Barrett. Conditions locked until age 30 or upon demonstration of financial hardship with written request. 2 co-signers, my lawyer and myself. He didn't flinch, just nodded again. Of course, by the time we finished, it was nearly 4 o'clock. The bank was quieter now, the post-lunch lull setting in. As Andrew walked me out, he held the door open and said, "Not many people take this kind of step. It takes clarity." "No," I said. "It takes being ignored one too many times." He nodded respectfully. "Well, good for you." I stepped out into the sunlight. The world looked the same. Dogs barked. Tires hissed against the road. The wind bent the tops of trees, but inside, something had shifted. The rope between me and Laura had always been invisible. A lifeline, a leash, a net. Today, I'd cut it. Not to hurt her, to breathe again. The first call came that evening, just after dinner time, when people think the world is soft enough to deliver hard news. I let it ring. Laura didn't leave a voicemail. Of course not. She never liked recording anything she couldn't edit. The second call came an hour later, then a third, this time from Robert's number. I muted the phone and placed it face down on the table. Let them wonder. I washed the dishes slowly, without rush, like I had nothing urgent waiting. The kitchen light flickered once an old bulb, nothing more, but it felt symbolic. I tightened the fixture gently, careful with my hands. I'd never been careless, no matter what they said behind closed doors. When the landline rang, I answered. "Grandma?" Emily's voice, tight, whispering. "I'm here, sweetheart." "They know." "Of course they do." She exhaled, clearly walking. I could hear her boots on concrete, the wind catching her hair. I tried to tell Mom to calm down. She wouldn't listen. "She said you'd lost your mind." I chuckled. "She's wrong." I found it again. "She's furious." Emily continued. She was yelling about the money, the accounts, the trust. Dad was trying to. I interrupted gently. "Did anyone ask why?" There was a pause. "No, just how." I nodded, though she couldn't see. "That tells you everything you need to know." She stopped walking. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine, Emily. For the first time in a long while, I'm fine. I don't know what to do." "You don't have to do anything," I said. "You've already done enough. You showed up. You listened." She hesitated. "They think I knew." "Let them." Another pause. "Grandma, they might come to the house." "Let them." I hung up gently, not out of anger, but finality. 10 minutes later, headlights flicked across the window. I stood still, watching them through the curtain. Then the doorbell rang. One long, impatient chime. I didn't open it. Robert tried next, knocking 3 times, sharp and measured. "Helen, it's us." I said nothing. Then Laura's voice. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Can we please talk? I let the silence stretch. I know you're in there. Of course I was. More knocking. Louder now. You're being unreasonable. This is family. I thought of every holiday I'd spent alone, every card that never came, every doctor's appointment I'd taken a cab to while they posted vacation photos from the Bahamas. This isn't how we solve things, she called. Not with lawyers. And yet, that's exactly how she'd tried to solve me. More silence. Then at last, retreating footsteps. I exhaled slowly. My hands were steady. The phone vibrated again later. A message, not a call. Mom, we need to talk. This isn't the way. I didn't reply. Because finally, I wasn't speaking their language anymore. I was learning my own again. The next morning, I found a note shoved through the mail slot, folded 3 times, printed on expensive stationery, the kind Laura reserved for holiday cards and legal threats. The handwriting was hers, sharp, efficient. Mom, I don't understand what you're trying to prove. We were only trying to protect you. Everything we've done has been out of love and concern. You've made some drastic decisions. We hope you'll reconsider. Laura. No, I'm sorry. No, I see your side. Just concern masked as control. A demand for re-entry, not reconciliation. I didn't reply. Instead, I made a cup of tea and sat in David's chair, rereading the note like a stranger trying to decipher the language of a distant country. I could see where she believed herself. That was the tragic part. Laura had rewritten the story in her own mind so thoroughly that she believed it had always been this way. She wasn't malicious, just entitled, raised by love and now insulted by its independence. Around noon, I took a walk. Not far, just down the street, past the old post office, through the park where David used to feed the ducks. My knees protested, but I ignored them. I needed to move, to breathe in something unfiltered. At the pond, I sat on a bench and watched the water. Leaves drifted lazily across the surface, carried by the wind, not their own will. I wasn't going to be one of those leaves. Someone sat down beside me. I figured I'd find you here, Emily said. I smiled. Still know me better than your mother. She didn't laugh, just sat quietly, her elbows on her knees, watching the water with me. Everything's so tense at home, she said. It's like you threw a stone in a perfectly still pond, and now nobody knows how to swim. They weren't swimming, I said. They were floating on my back. She didn't argue. Dad says you're punishing them. I raised an eyebrow. I'm protecting what's mine. Emily turned to me, her eyes searching. You really gave it all to me? I nodded. Not out of revenge, out of recognition. She swallowed. It's too much. No, I said gently. It's just enough for someone who knocked on my door without needing a reason. She looked down at her hands. I don't want to lose them. You won't. But they may lose parts of you if they don't change. She didn't respond, and we let the silence stretch again. A good, kind silence. Before she left, I handed her an envelope. Not a check, not instructions, just a letter, handwritten, folded once. What is it? She asked. Read it when you get home. She hugged me then, long, tight, the way she used to as a child after a nightmare. I love you, Grandma. I know, I said. That's why this works. When she was gone, I sat on the bench a little longer, watching the wind ripple the pond. Laura wanted calm, wanted control, but sometimes disruption is a kind of love too, the kind that shakes a tree hard enough for something new to grow. Let her be rattled. Let her wonder what happens next. I wasn't done yet. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. I heard them before I saw them, little fragments caught in conversations not meant for my ears. At the pharmacy. She cut them off. I heard, just like that. No, not everything. Just the house and the garden. Well, maybe everything. At the church social. Laura looked like a ghost last Sunday. Something about a trust fund given to the granddaughter. I always said Helen had more spine than she let on. Even Marlene, red sneakers and all, slowed her walk when she passed my house. She didn't wave, just lingered a moment too long, pretending to adjust the leash, as if waiting for me to come outside and confirm the story. I didn't. Let them talk. The story was theirs now, but the truth was still mine. What unsettled them wasn't the legal shift. It wasn't the revoked access or the frozen accounts. It was that I'd broken character. The quiet mother, the agreeable grandmother, the one who baked, nodded, and paid. That version of me, the one they had all grown comfortable with, was gone. Or rather, I'd stood up and gently stepped out of her shadow. The next visitor wasn't Laura. Not yet. It was her son, Alex. I hadn't seen him in months, not since he'd borrowed money for emergency travel, then posted beach photos on social media 3 days later. He stood on the porch like someone caught stealing apples, hands in his pockets, his eyes down. I opened the door slowly. Alex. Hi, Grandma. I waited. He shuffled. Mind if I come in? That depends. He blinked. On what? On whether this is a visit or a performance. He flushed. A visit. I stepped aside. Let him in. Watched him look around, as if he expected the furniture to judge him. He sat at the edge of the couch. Didn't take off his jacket. Didn't ask for tea. Finally, he said, Mom's upset. I'm aware. She's never seen you like this. Neither have you. He looked up. Is it true? About Emily? Yes. She's getting everything. She's receiving what was never owed to anyone but earned by someone. He exhaled through his nose. She's not even. I mean, she's younger. She doesn't need. I held up a hand. Stop before you say something you'll regret. He closed his mouth. I leaned forward, folding my hands. Alex, when was the last time you visited this house without needing something? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence answered for him. I've given more than money to this family, I said. I've given my time, my attention, my history. Most of it dismissed, some of it exploited. He stared at the floor. I'm not angry, I added, but I am no longer willing to fund my own invisibility. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw something unguarded in him. Not guilt, not shame, just confusion. Is this forever? No, just finally. He nodded slowly. Okay, I stood. You can visit any time. You can sit. We can talk. But if you come with open hands instead of an open heart, the door won't open next time. He stood too. I understand. I walked him to the door. Before he stepped out, he turned. You look strong. I am, I said, and I always was. You're just now noticing. He nodded, then walked down the steps. The porch creaked behind him, that familiar, loyal sound, still holding after all these years. I wrote the letter to Emily at the dining room table in the late afternoon light, the kind of soft gold that makes even dust look gentle. I used the good paper, the kind David bought in bulk before everything became digital and disposable. He believed some things were worth writing down with care. I wrote slowly. I didn't revise. This wasn't a performance. This was memory. This was blood. Emily, I never wanted to make you choose, and I don't expect you to defend me. What I did wasn't about dividing the family. It was about finally drawing a line where none had been. I spent years confusing silence with love, endurance with grace, but endurance without recognition becomes erasure. I gave you the trust because you saw me, not because you needed something or because you flattered me. You asked questions no one else bothered with. Did I sleep well? Was I eating enough? Did I still hum when I tended to the orchids? Those things may seem small, but when someone's disappearing piece by piece, small things become lifelines. I am not leaving you a reward. I am leaving you a reminder that dignity is not something we ask for. It's something we keep. The house, the money, they're symbols. They can be moved, sold, squandered. But if you hold on to one truth, let it be this: never become so efficient that you forget to be kind. If someday I'm no longer here, and you find yourself at a table full of people speaking over you, remember this moment. Take the pen first. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it with a faint press of my thumb. Then I added her name in my old cursive, the one Laura said looked too antique for modern life. I didn't send it. Not yet. I left it on the hallway table beside the phone, next to the little bowl of hard candy no one eats but everyone remembers. That night, the wind picked up. I could hear it through the fireplace vent, whistling like a child with secrets. I wrapped myself in David's old cardigan and sat on the porch, watching the branches of the maple sway. There was something comforting in the way the tree moved, not fighting the wind, just bending with it. Resilient, but never passive. Laura hadn't tried to call again. Neither had Robert. The silence had thickened into something almost ceremonial, like they were waiting for the next move, still hoping I'd flinch, that I'd undo the damage to their version of order. But I wasn't undoing anything. I was revealing. You reach a certain age, and people assume your story is winding down. What they don't realize is that some of us begin again with the clarity only survival gives. The next morning, I went to the notary's office, the same one I used after David passed. A kind woman with steady hands and a quiet mouth stamped the envelope that held the new trust papers. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I've never been surer." As I left, she said, "It's brave what you're doing." "No," I said, "it's overdue." Back at home, I placed the sealed documents in the fireproof box in the hall closet, the same box that held my marriage certificate, David's university diploma, and a photo of Emily watering the garden in bare feet. The legacy wasn't the assets. It was the decision to protect what mattered. The first apology didn't sound like one. It came in the form of an email from Laura. "Of course." She always preferred distance when the subject got too close. "Mom, I've had some time to think. I wish things hadn't escalated the way they did. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to make things easier, more secure for everyone involved. I'm sorry if it felt like we were taking control. That wasn't the intention. Let's find a time to talk. Maybe we can meet halfway on all this. Love, Laura." I read it twice. There it was again. I'm sorry if it felt like that small word, that loophole, the kind that cushions the sender and traps the recipient. Still, I printed it out and placed it in a drawer. Not because it mattered, but because it was proof of her awareness, her discomfort, her shifting tone. Later that day, I saw her car drive by. Not slow, not suspicious, just curious. I was trimming the rose bushes. I didn't wave. She didn't stop. The next day, another email, shorter, no apologies. Just, "Have you reconsidered anything?" I hadn't, so I didn't respond. Instead, I took Emily out for lunch, a small diner halfway between our neighborhoods. No frills, just good soup and sunlight in the windows. She was already seated when I arrived, her notebook open, a pen tapping. She stood when she saw me. "Nice sweater," she said, hugging me. "It's very I've ruined lives and sleep just fine. I smiled. It's David's. We ordered lentil soup and bread. She didn't mention the emails. She didn't mention her mother. She waited. I finally said, she's trying, but she still thinks the damage was in the decision, not in the years that led up to it. Emily nodded. She's rewriting the narrative. She wants to be the one who reached out. She can have that. I'm not in competition anymore. She tilted her head. And if she shows up? If she knocks on the door and says the right things? I took a sip of tea. Then, I'll listen. Not for her sake. For mine. Emily smiled, a little sad. You really don't hate her, do you? No, I said. But I don't owe her the comfort of pretending she didn't fail me. We ate quietly after that. As we finished, she pulled something from her bag, the letter I'd written her. I've read it 6 times, she said. I keep it in my desk at school for when things get loud. I reached across the table and touched her wrist. That's what it's for. She looked at me, her eyes full. What happens next? I thought for a moment. I live, I said. That's the part they never expected. Back at home, the mailbox was empty, but someone had left a small bouquet on the porch. White tulips, tied with a ribbon. No note. Laura's favorite flower. It wasn't forgiveness, but maybe it was something close to recognition. I didn't bring them inside. I left them there on the step. Let the wind decide what to do with them. The envelope was thick, official, and hand-delivered. Emily brought it over on a Thursday morning, her cheeks flushed from the cold. It's happening, she said, holding it out. He wants everyone present. A formal reading. I took it, without urgency. Of course he does. That man always did enjoy a performance. He was Mr. Davies, my lawyer, who had decided, perhaps with a touch of theatrical instinct, to organize a formal reading of the revised trust and will. All parties invited, all assumptions to be tested. I placed the envelope on the table without opening it. Emily watched me. Are you ready? I've been ready since the day Laura said I get overwhelmed. She smiled, but it was sad. She'll be there. And Alex and Robert. I'm counting on it. The meeting was set for the following Monday at the law office, 3 p.m. sharp. I wore the same navy blue dress I'd worn the night of Robert's party, not out of symbolism, but out of economy. No need to dress up the truth in new fabric. When we arrived, the receptionist looked startled, then composed herself. Mrs. Barrett, they're all here. I nodded. The conference room was just as I remembered. Long table, neutral tones, the soft buzz of artificial civility. Laura sat at the far end, arms crossed, her eyes unreadable. Robert was beside her, nodding politely. Alex scrolled through his phone. Emily stood behind me until I motioned for her to sit next to me. Mr. Davies entered last, closing the door gently behind him. He greeted no one in particular, then opened the folder in front of him. Thank you all for coming, Mrs. Barrett has asked that I read the contents of her updated estate documents in full with all parties present. This is both legal and, in this case, intentional. He glanced around. No one spoke. He began. He read the clauses, line by line, the revocation of all prior arrangements, the dissolution of shared access to accounts, the reallocation of assets, the appointment of Emily as sole beneficiary of the primary trust. Laura flinched. Robert leaned forward slightly. Alex looked up, and then the final clause, a personal letter, included by request, written by me. Mr. Davies cleared his throat and read to those listening. I am not gone yet, but for once, I want to be heard while I'm still here. I have lived quietly, generously, and at times, invisibly. That was my mistake. I mistook proximity for love, obligation for care. But one person, Only one came to my door without expectation, and so she inherits not just my belongings, but my belief that small kindnesses matter. The rest of you, do with this as you will, but do not say you were blindsided. You simply weren't paying attention. Silence followed, not the awkward kind, the real kind. The kind that arrives when there's nothing left to bargain with. Laura was the first to speak. "You manipulated her," she said to Emily. Emily didn't flinch. "No," she protected herself. "You're just not used to seeing it." Robert leaned back, his hands folded, as if reviewing a failed investment. Alex stood abruptly. "Can we contest this?" Mr. Davies answered calmly. "You're welcome to try, but you'll lose." Laura turned to me. Her voice was quiet, sharp. "You're tearing this family apart." I met her eyes. "No, I'm removing the blindfold. What happens next is up to you." She didn't respond. She didn't have a script for this. Emily reached under the table and took my hand, and just like that, it was done. No screaming, no threats, just truth, finally documented. As we walked out of the room, I felt lighter, not vindicated, just free. You don't wait for dignity to be handed back to you. You take it, quietly, firmly, without apology. It's been 6 weeks since the reading. The sky has turned, the light different, now thinner, colder, as if the year itself is starting to retreat. Laura hasn't called. Robert sent one email, short, legal probing. I didn't reply. Alex posted something online about false matriarchs. I laughed, poured myself a cup of tea, and watered the orchids. But Emily came every week, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with silence. We didn't always talk. We didn't need to. Once, she brought an old photo album she'd found in her mother's attic. Inside were pictures even I'd forgotten existed. Laura, as a child, climbing trees in scuffed shoes. David dancing barefoot in the kitchen. Me, younger, not smiling for the camera, but smiling behind it. Emily pointed to one picture and said, "You always looked like you knew something no one else did." "I did," I said. "I just didn't always act like it." One afternoon she found the letter again, the one I'd written her, now creased at the folds from rereading. "Do you think they'll ever forgive you?" she asked. "I didn't ask them to," I said. "Forgiveness assumes guilt." She nodded. "Do you forgive them?" I thought for a moment. I forgive the parts of them that were never taught better. That seemed to sit right between us. Not heavy, just true. The house is quieter now, but not empty. I keep the fire going. I bake small things. I write notes I never send. And when the mail comes, bills, catalogs, the occasional card, I open each one slowly. I'm not in a hurry anymore. The neighbors still gossip, but with less heat. Marlene waved yesterday. She even smiled. Perhaps she's decided I didn't ruin the family. I just reminded them that I was part of it. Last week, Emily planted new bulbs along the fence. Tulips again, white, like the ones Laura left on the porch. I never did throw them away. Let them wilt on their own. There was something honest in that decay. Tonight, I'll cook for 2. Emily's coming. We'll eat, maybe play a game, maybe sit in the quiet. She always turns off her phone when she's here. Says this house has better reception for the kind of connection that matters. She's right. I don't know what Laura will do next, or Alex, or Robert, but I know what I'll do. I'll keep my door unlocked for love and bolted for entitlement. I'll remember who I was, even when no one else did. And I'll live every remaining day, not as someone waiting to be remembered, but as someone who already is. If this story made you feel something, If it reminded you of your own voice, your own worth, your own power, then share it. Let someone else remember themselves too.